Just a note before we begin, this webinar is being recorded for registrants to watch later. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Flax Plant Along. Before we get started, I would like to take a moment to introduce your webinar team, Lisa, Anita, Jocelyn, Lee, and myself, Rebecca. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type your question into the chat box, and Lisa and Lee will be monitoring these questions and we'll ask them as we go along with each question period that comes up. Now, please allow me to introduce our guest for this morning. Kat Haggard is a spinner weaver based in Waterdown, Ontario. Kat loves everything about flax, from the beautiful flowers to the hand of the finished cloth, and is excited to share the steps taken to produce versatile, durable, and beautiful linen. You can follow her on Instagram at cat_theflaxlady. In this live Zoom webinar, Kat will be sharing with us her techniques for finishing up with your flax. Good morning, Kat, and welcome.
Hello, thank you very much, Rebecca, and welcome to everybody here. I cannot believe that this is the last webinar of this series. When we started all those months ago, it seemed like September would never come, but here we are, and it's the end. And well, the end of this portion. Hopefully it's the start of your flax journey and that you'll be continuing to grow flax and to play with it and discover all that you can about it. So today we're going to be talking about fiber processing and storage. So because it's not very likely that you're going to be spinning what you process as soon as you process it. So we're going to talk a little bit about storage first. But before that, I would like to start with a little bit of feedback from you, telling us about your experience through this process, any more funny stories. I know some people got a really late start to their flax. If they want to talk about what that's been like, because so much of the perceived wisdom is to plant early, plant early, plant early. But I know a number of people got a late start. A friend of mine is just starting to pull her flax off her plot right now. So if there's anything that you want to share, I want to throw the floor open to you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can see more of you. And please feel free to raise your hand or type something in the chat, and we'll see how you've done so far. It always feels a little uncomfortable here for me as nobody says anything.
Hi, Kat. I was one of those late planters too. And I'm surprised by, I've just started pulling my flax. I have a new puppy, so every time I get near it, he loves to go and roll in it. But I was amazed by the number of times I would look out the window and my flax was flat. It had fallen, like it had, whether it was a heavy rain or not flat, but down. And
Right.
I was amazed how every time, for the most part, it would pop back up, as it stand back up again, as it dried out, and as, you know, the heat again, the sunlight. But I was really happy with one where I planted my flax. That seemed to work out really well. And just every time I thought, oh, this is it. It's flat, it's down, it's done. And back up it came, you know, later in the afternoon.
Yeah. Do you remember what variety you planted?
No, but I'll have to check on that.
Yeah, because some varieties have been bred to help resist lodging and to recover from lodging like that. So that would be a good thing to know.
Actually, I just purchased one of the kits that came.
Okay, so then it's either Avian or Natalie. And I know that Avian says in its description that it is resistant to lodging. And I'm not sure whether that means that it's been bred so it doesn't fall over, or that it recovers from when it falls over. But
yeah. Anyway, it worked. I was impressed. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else have anything? Yeah, Sandy, I see you raising your hand.
Okay. I'm using dew retting because I don't like big bad smells. And also it got cool before I was ready to do the retting. I was disappointed that I didn't have very many flowers on my flax, and as a result, I didn't have enough seeds, and I just haven't bothered to keep the seeds. I've left them for the chipmunks instead. But would there be any particular reason for that sort of thing happening?
I have no idea about that. I mean, it's a plant growth thing. So there's any number of reasons, like whatever your growing conditions were, would have affected that. So maybe it was putting its energy into something else. Although typically, I think when a plant feels stressed, it tends to throw all its energy into flowers and making more seeds. So maybe your plants were really pampered and they didn't feel like they had to
Yeah.
grow flowers.
Well, they were really tall, or at least I felt they were really, really tall.
Yeah. And do you remember what variety you planted?
I think it was the Natalie.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's good.
And it was from one of the kits, but I've got lots of seeds left. So I guess if I throw them in the freezer and want to plant some more flax next year, they may still come.
Right. Or mix it in with a new batch of seed. So I see you raising your hand, Ruth, but before I wanted to read one of the chats. And that is Elaine says that my flax grew very well. It was about 3.5 feet high, and she harvested at 80 days. Her problem was that the chipmunks ate the seeds no matter how she stood it to dry, and she might not have any seed either. So she produced, but then her bounty was taken away from her by another hand of nature, I guess. And Ruth, you're still on mute.
Oh, there. Hi, Kat. I typed a bit about starting early in May, and I had to, of course, take it off, harvest it later. I did get seed. I think some birds were taking some of the little sparrows or something which I'm amazed that they're able to land and actually eat it. But that was quite a revelation to me. So there was little holes in it when I harvested it on some of them. But I did get some seed, and I'm very happy to share with any. It was Natalie. Anybody would like some, and I have a little bit from my kit still left, so I'd be happy. I didn't have a huge plot, and I'm ready now, but because it's colder, it's probably, I don't know, maybe 14, 12 degrees. So going down to, high 60 Fahrenheit, it's at night and stuff. So anyways, I think it's going to be slower. I've had it in 3 days, and it's just starting to get slimy and murky now. So I guess it's an experiment. We'll see what it's like in colder, non-80 degree weather. but anyways, it's been very fun. I really enjoyed the winnowing. I thought that was a hoot. I got it all over my face and clothes, but it was great. It really worked. Anyways, that's me.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, so I'll go back to sharing my screen then. Wake up my mouse. There we are. So here's my agenda for the day. Today I'm going to be talking about mechanical processing and storage. And I say mechanical processing because I consider retting part of the processing process. But here I'm going to be talking about things that you use tools for to separate the fiber from the rest of the plant. So the things I'm going to talk about are a flax oven, a flax break, scutching knife and board for the scutching process, hackles for the hackling process, and then at the end I'll talk about storage. And at the end of each of these sections, except the one on the flax oven, I'll throw it open for questions. So if you have any questions about what you've seen on my demonstration videos, feel free to ask them then. Or at the very end, there'll be one last question and answer session at the end too. So if you remember a question, don't just write it down. We'll be able to cover it later. So a flax oven is not something that's commonly talked about. It's not used a lot. And that's because nowadays we have, like, the modern age has allowed us to control our time and control our environment in a way that didn't happen even 100 years ago. So we can process in more climate controlled environments. We can process, by turning on a light, we can process later into the night, and we can control nature to a certain extent. But back in the day, that wasn't possible. And flax, let's say this a different way. One of the great things about linen is that when you wear linen, it wicks moisture away from you. It absorbs moisture. And that's why when you wear it, it wicks away your perspiration. You feel a lot cooler. Well, that tendency to absorb moisture is still happening when the fiber is in the straw. And when you go to process your flax, if you process it on a humid day, you're going to find that the flax will feel like it's under-retted. A lot of the boon or shive, which is the small bits of the pith and the straw, will stick to the fiber. The moisture in the air will kind of reactivate the pectin that's left, and your flax won't clean as well. I know when I demonstrate at Westfield Heritage Village on a hot summer, humid summer day, the portions of the flax that I'm grasping to do the processing always have a lot of boon still stuck to them. And it's just because of the moisture from my hands reactivating the pectin. So what they did in the past was they used what's called a flax oven. And the picture on this screen shows an example of that on the right. So if you were to look at the flax oven from above, it would look like a capital E. There's a back wall behind those fires. And that's to help with the chimney effect, to funnel the heat up. And you'd have separate fires in separate little enclosures. And across the top, there would be a grate. And you'd put your flax above that, and then the heat from the fire would dry out the flax so that you would be able to go through your processing steps with dried flax even when the weather wasn't really helpful. This is something that is not used very often nowadays. I've only seen it once in use down in Pennsylvania. And of course, you have to be very careful that you don't set your flax on fire because it is flammable. And that leads me to this painting here, which is one of my very favorite flax paintings. And this is of a scutching bee. So scutching bees were a thing back in the middle of the 1800s. The community would come together like any kind of bee, a barn raising or a quilting or any kind of bee. It's basically a work party. When you have a hard and or tedious job, if you come together as a community, it's much more enjoyable. So here in this picture, you see the sober people are on the right side doing their work very diligently, but as your eyes move left across the crowd, the party gets increasingly riotous until on the far left, you can see the flax oven has been totally disregarded. The flax is caught on fire, and maybe it was those young men climbing all over the wood pile that were supposed to be watching it. But I love this painting. So there you go, that's a flax oven. But the first step that we're really going to be working with is the flax break. So what you do with a flax break is you take your long, stiff, kind of ratty looking bundles of flax after the retting process, and you're breaking it up. You're removing its structural integrity. You're breaking the pith and the straw into smaller pieces. And if your flax has been well retted and it's not too humid, then that will, for a large part, fall away during the breaking process. Now on this screen, there's a number of pictures of different kinds of technology that were used for this process. It's believed that the Vikings accomplished this by striking the flax with a wooden mallet against a rock. The picture on the top right is a medieval painting of flax breaking. That's what the scholars think it is, although I do know a current person who's alive right now said that she thinks that this is more a depiction of rippling than it is of breaking the flax, using that, or maybe winnowing. I'm not sure. It does look to me a little bit more likely that it would be breaking, but I'm not going to argue with her. And then the picture on the bottom right is a picture of some ladies from Czechoslovakia who are using a flax break, very similar to the ones that we see here in North America. These breaks have just a single blade on top and two blades on the bottom. So here I have a couple of videos. I have a video showing me breaking the flax using the tools that I had made from the wool gatherer's plans. And then I'll have a video of a hack that you can use if you don't have this kind of equipment. So here is my break. I'm doing my air attendant impersonation here. The top handle has 2 blades and the bottom has 3. And what this does is it corrugates the fiber, as you'll see a little bit later in the video. So when I'm working on this, I like a bundle about the size of a loonie or a toonie. That is because of my hand size. I find that this doesn't tire my hand as much as using a bigger bundle, and it helps me to manage the flax. So there you can see how it's corrugating the flax. Now I tend to start by breaking the tip end first. There is no reason for that. It's just a habit that I've gotten into. And I start at the tips and then progressively start the breaking process a little further into the flax bundle, moving toward the end. So when I turn around to the root ends, the roots are pretty gnarly and hard to break. So you can see I spread it out in a thinner layer. If it stayed in a close bundle, I wouldn't be able to break it on the break. So I believe I have my sound turned off on this video, but it makes a really satisfying, crinkly, crunching sound when you do this. And if you can see, watch the ends slide sideways as it goes through the break. This is one of the features. It's not a feature, but it's, well, I'll stop here for, well, I'm not quite done. Sorry about that. Now I'm done. So I'll stop talking so you can look at what my flax looks like after the break. Okay, so because of the design of a flax break, it does a great job of corrugating and breaking up the fiber in the middle portion of your bundles, but not so great at the tips. What tends to happen is the tip slides down in between the blades instead of being bent around them. And so it doesn't really get broken up as well as the center. So we're going to take care of that with our sketching board and our sketching knife and with our hackles later, but that's kind of a normal thing that happens when you're using your flax break. So you can see that a lot of boon or shive are both terms used to refer to what falls away from the fiber during processing, and I use them alternately when I'm speaking. You can see that there's a lot underneath my flax break. So this is something else that I want to address. When you have a bundle of flax, you are going to be left, when you look at your bundle, when you start, consider that like 100% of your working flax. When you're done, only 10% of what you hold in your hand when you start with is going to be fiber that you can spin. So be prepared for that loss. I wasn't prepared for that. I was thinking that I would get lots and lots of fiber from my bundles, but really all you get, and it's normal to only get 10% fiber, I guess based on volume or weight, compared to your starting bundle. And of that 10%, so only 4% is going to be the long line flax that everybody thinks about and swoons over when you're thinking about flax. 6% is going to be tow, which personally I really love to spin. It makes a beautiful fiber and it spins up really nicely. And when I find it very funny because people think, oh, tow, short fibers, I don't want to deal with that. But a tow fiber is still 5 or 6 inches long, and compared to all the protein fibers with much shorter staples, we're still dealing with quite a long fiber when we're spinning it. So it's just in comparison to the line flax that you consider it really short. But I'll talk about that a little bit more later. So my hack is I have two methods of breaking the flax, and you'll see finally, after all my admonitions of safety first and wear gloves, I am putting them on here. It's not because of the cold. This video was taken in February, but it wasn't a cold February day. It's more because the boon is very stabby. You can get splinters from it very easily. Okay, so what I'm showing you here is that I use a smaller bundle when I hand rat, only about the size of my finger. And the first way that sorry, not hand rat, hand break. The first way is just to use my hands and to bend it and to wiggle it and to use those motions to have the boon fall away. So the gloves are very handy for that. You can see it has lost its structural integrity very nicely. So the second method is to use an ice scraper. So finally, we're getting to the ice scraper for those of you who received my packets. Although this one has a handle, the ones I sent you were nice and flat for postage. And as you can see, I'm just bending the flax against the blade of the ice scraper. This is not my preferred method for this, mostly because as the ice scraper gets toward the tips tend to splay out, and it becomes more difficult for me to bend it efficiently over the blade of the ice scraper. So I tend to use my hands for the breaking if I'm doing just small amounts of breaking. Okay, so I'm going to stop here, and if anybody has any questions about breaking your flax, please put them in the chat or raise your hand, and I'll try and answer them.
Hi, Kat. We had Jane popped in just an update before we switched over. I'll just read it. My flax grew very well, tall, and did not fall over. Avian harvested at about 84 days and dried and have lots of seed pods not yet harvested. I was going to ret on the ground, but we keep having these torrential downpours, so we have been reluctant to start. Okay, then Pat has asked, or she's saying, we have a metal outside banister. I broke the flax over the flat or edge of the banister. I bent it over the top or pulled it back and forth.
That's a great idea. That is a great idea. And then you don't have to store it anywhere. It's already in its permanent storage place. So you get bonus points for that. Okay, any other questions? Yeah.
Carol is asking, can you show the video again of your hand breaking, please?
Okay, so the hack one, is that the one? I'm guessing hand breaking. Okay, so gloves. And as far as gloves, I like these gloves. These are those super light ones that you can get at the garden centers that have a grippy palm. So I can still really feel, I have a really good sensitivity in my fingers, but it's grabby enough. So I might be going out and getting some more of those this fall before they disappear. If there's something about this video that you want me to speak to, throw it in the chat so Lisa can tell me. One thing I want to add is that when you do this, it is helpful to have a very flat surface to work on, like this workbench of my husband's. Okay, any other questions or comments?
I have a question. There isn't any more in the chat, but what do you suggest doing with all the 90% waste? Do you just put it in your compost, or is there another use for it?
Yeah, well, back in settlement days, there was a use for every single scrap of it in different ways. But right now, I use it for compost. It's a really good brown addition to my compost pile. So that's what I do with it. And often some of the waste from my hackles, which I'll talk about later, I use straight as mulch. Okay, so I will carry on. So now I'm going to talk about scutching. So scutching is using a scutching knife to scrape your flax against a scutching board. And the purpose of this is to deal with those ends. Remember, I said the flax break doesn't do a great job on the tips and the root ends because it slides between the blades. So using your scutching knife will help to break up the boon and the shive at the tips. What this process also does is it starts to tear away shorter fibers from the tips. So all those little teeny branches that were holding extra flowers at the top are going to come away during the scutching process, if they haven't already, through the breaking process. So it takes care of those. Some of the gnarliest tips of the roots will be scraped away as well. And the boon that has been broken up but hasn't fallen away on the break gets brushed away with your scutching knife during the scutching process. So on this page are examples of different scutching knives. They look wildly different. And the wool gatherer scutching knife looks like a cricket bat, as you'll see in my video on the next slide. In the Scandinavian countries, scutching knives were betrothal gifts. And so you get beautifully decorated scutching knives like the one in the top right picture. The bottom left picture is a more mechanized scutching machine where pushing on a treadle like on a spinning wheel turns the wheel that has a series of scutching knives attached to it, and then the board is where you see the flax hanging there. I always wish I had one of those because scutching is my least favorite stage in manual processing. I find it grueling, hard on my arms, but whenever I try to skip it or to not do it well enough, it causes problems later on. So it's still a very important part, a very important step in the process. So even if you hate it as much as I do, I wouldn't advise that you skip it. Lately, I've been using a scutching knife similar to the central picture rather than the one with the wool gatherers. It's lighter and I find it easier to use and to control. So you want to think carefully about scutching knives. These are easy to replicate. I know of people who just use painting sticks as a scutching knife. I saw somebody took a pizza peel and cut it in half and then used that as a scutching knife. In the last edition of Handwoven, in the beginning section where they're talking about like cute little gizmos, there was an ad for a band knife made out of maple, and I followed the link. And those are about 12 inches long, but it's a hardwood. So the maple's a nice hardwood. It has a straight beveled edge. And I think it would be light enough that you could really maneuver it easily. And it was only $18 US. So that might be a really interesting option to pursue if you don't have a scutching knife. And for a scutching board, it doesn't need to be standing up. It can just be a plank that you lean against. Maybe that same railing that one of you used to break your flax, you could lean a plank against, and that could be your scutching board. So this particular set of equipment doesn't have to be fancy. So here is my video using the wool gatherer stuff. There's my scutching board and my knife. So as you can see, it looks a bit like a cricket bat. I'm finding this quite heavy. So if you were planning to make the wool gatherers stuff and you have not done it yet, this might be one where you want to reconsider what's in their plans. So I'm showing you in slow-mo what I'm doing. With this particular scutching knife, I find it most efficient to have full contact of the the board. I don't know if you can hear the sound on my side. To have full contact with the board with my knife and scrape down with a fair degree of force, which is very tiring. With the sketching knife that I've been using lately, the lighter one, I find that it's more of a brushing motion, and I can control where the knife is hitting my flax a little bit better. So the actual, here's what it looks like when you're done with the sketching. Looks a bit like raffia here. You can see the fiber bundles. They've been flattened a bit, and they have separated from each other. So yeah, so your technique here is going to depend on your tools. My most important tip is to make sure that the hand that's holding the flax is well away from your knife. So in a design like this one with the notch, make sure your fingers stay behind the notch. I think you can figure out why I say that. It's from painful experience. Yeah, that's it for that. So now I'm going to show you my hack for a sketching board and a sketching knife. Once again, my ice scraper comes into use. And for this, you really do need a nice flat surface. Now, somehow wind the flax around a finger or two to hold it, or your ice scraper will pull it right out of your hand. And you're going to start at the tips and move toward the center, and you're scraping away the flax. Now, the first time you do this with your tools, if you're using these tools, be very careful, because I found with this particular ice scraper, it has a very sharp edge, and I was slicing through the tips of my flax. So it took me a little bit to figure out the pressure and the angle. But once I did, this did a really good job of sketching. Really quite nice. There was very little boon left on the fibers when I was done, which isn't always the case with my bigger sketching knife and sketching board. Okay, so that's all I have to say right now about sketching. I'll stop here for questions.
Hi, Kat. Yes, we have a few. This question came in just after the last question break, but it's speaking to which, in this step, breaking the fiber, which follows retting, I'm confused about the term sketching versus hack.
Okay, so I'm sorry about that hack. So my hack, what I mean by hack is a way you can do it that isn't without using real tools for it. So this is just me taking, it's common, there's lots of memes on the internet about easy ways to do things if you don't have the right tools, and they're called hacks. So I apologize for the confusion. So a hack to me is just quick and dirty, not the real proper tools to do it, but it'll get the job done. So that's what I mean by hack. Breaking is when the fiber is going from an intact piece of straw to one where the straw has been broken off or broken up at least, and a lot of it falls. So that's the breaking process. And then the sketching process is a way of removing more of that boon from the fiber strands using some kind of bladed instrument to do that. And its job is to remove short fibers and boon. So I hope that clarifies the screens there.
Thanks, Kat. I didn't actually catch that, but I can see how it would have been confusing. Yeah. Susan shared that she made they made a sketching knife out of a spare piece of molding. There you go.
So that would be great, because the molding comes down to a narrower edge. So some of the things that you're looking for when you're making a sketching knife of your own is that you have some point of contact with the flax that is sufficiently long. Now, I want to say to make sure you have a flat edge, but if you go back to the long tradition of the Scandinavian sketching knives, which are curved, they're curved, but it has a gentle curve so that about this much of the scutching knife is going to be in contact with the flasks at any time. So when you're making your own, make sure you have enough contact with the flax. So a flattish portion about this long, and then a bevel on it. So the molding has that bevel it goes from a thick end to a thin edge. So that's already built into it for you. So that's great.
The next question was just a request for the link for the scutching knife that you were mentioning, but Lisa has added that we can include that when we send out the video link.
Sure,
if that works for you.
Yeah, that's fine. So it's avstuga.com. So but we'll send that out for sure.
Okay, and one more question. How do you know when you're finished the scutching process?
The answer is you just know. So visually you're as you gain experience, it's going to become more intuitive. But when you're first starting out, you're looking for it to look very much like raffia. So you want to see, if you look at the center picture on the screen right now, you want to see flat, almost ribbons of fiber without it'll still have a lot of boon in it most likely, or straw in it most likely, but a lot of it to have fallen away. And it will be suppler than after the break. After the break, it's kind of jagged because that is corrugating it on a kind of in a W pattern by going over the blades. So it does, while it's no longer straight and it's kind of limp and floppy, it's floppy in straight segments. After you're done scutching, it's going to be very loose, and the whole thing, like I said, is going to be ribbon-like. And so that's how you'll know that it's done. You'll also be able to tell, I should have mentioned this before, but you'll be able to tell once you start breaking, and even more once you start scutching, how good your ret was. So if you start your breaking process and you're not seeing a lot of boon falling down, and it's not that humid a day, then that's a sign that you might be under-retted. And excuse me, you might want to take that batch, tie it off with a bit of jute, and then re-ret it a little bit later. Again, at this stage, if after your scutching you're still finding that the straw has flattened and lost its rigidity, but it's still attached to the fiber after your scutching, that's another sign that you have under-retted your fiber and it needs to go back. You can send your fiber back for more retting at any time of the process. So so don't worry about I've gone too far, I've got to keep going with that. That's not something that you have to keep in mind. Even at the hackling stage, you can stop and take that fiber and ret it some more if you think that that would be useful. Okay, another question?
Great. No, Kat, that's everything for now.
Okay. Okay, next step is hackles. Hackles are like hairbrushes made with sharpened steel nails instead of bristles. And there's two types shown on this slide. In the top left, you have kind of a Scandinavian style with the round heads and a long board that you use standing up. And this is the style that's used in the wool gatherer plans. The other pictures are the kind of hackles that you would be more likely to see in antique shops here in Ontario. They're a more Germanic style. They have a square or rectangular base, and they're designed to be clamped or somehow affixed to a workbench. So that picture in the bottom left, those holes would fit over pegs that would be on the workbench to hold it steady so that you could have two hands available to help you with your hackling. So traditionally they were made with square nails, which is the way that a blacksmith would, an apprentice or a journeyman blacksmith, that's one of their first jobs, is to learn to make nails that they would have produced. The tips are sharpened to a needle point. You can prick yourself on these nails, and on some of the square ones, even the square edges were sharpened in addition to the points. if you have a set of hackles like this, it's usually advised to have more than one hackle. The different coarsenesses of hackles have different jobs. You would go from your coarsest hackle, which means it has the biggest nails and they're spaced the widest distance apart. And the job of that hackle is to remove more of the straw and more of the short straw-like bits from the fiber. As you go to progressively finer hackles, as the nails get smaller in diameter and closer together, the job is going to change slightly. They will still be taking out bone and shorter fibers, but what they will increasingly be doing is piercing that ribbon of fiber to separate the individual flax fibers in the bundle from each other, so that you end up with flax that is very close to individual flax fibers. So as you go through that process, as the fibers separate from each other, it's just like when you're spinning a singles thread is much easier to break than even a 2-ply. So in a similar way, as you're separating the individual fibers from each other, they are going to be weaker and more prone to breaking. So if you continue with your finest hackle too long in an effort to get all the bone out, to clean it up perfectly, you're going to find that you're going to get a lot of waste as your tools break the individual fibers. But I will get to that in a minute. So I'm going to show you the 3 hackles and then my hack for using the hackles at the end. So the first hackle is my coarsest, and it has really wide nails and they're set quite wide apart. Now again, I tend to start with the tip end. It doesn't matter really. A lot of people like to keep their fiber aligned, roots together throughout the process so that they can maintain that alignment through the spinning process as well. I have not found that it makes that much of a difference in my spinning, but that may be more a comment on my spinning than on the use of doing that. You can see the toe. The toe is what's left in the hackle. This hackle is mostly bits of straw and short fibers. But there's lots of boons still falling on my foot. You can see my shoes almost covered with bits of straw. Like to start at the tip, go toward the middle as usual. My free hand tends to spread the flax, and I move the flax around on my hackle to most effectively get at the spots that need to have their boon removed. Excuse me. So here is my fiber after the first hackle. You can still see ribbons in the flax, but they've been broken up a bit. And yeah, so you can see in all these videos, I take my toe and I just throw it to the side. In real life, I don't do that as much. That was just the world of video. The toe from this hackle I tend to use as mulch in my garden because there's still a lot of straw in it, and it would be difficult to spin, but it's great at keeping the moisture in my soil, and so I like to use it as mulch. So my second hackle here, this is my medium hackle. The action on all of these is the same. And if you have a work tabletop hackle, you'll be doing the same thing, except you get to sit down and draw it toward you. So you can see the toe in this one. You're starting to see a lot more fiber in it. And I would tend to start keeping this, maybe not the first bunch of toe from the hackle that I pull from the hackle. So this I would probably use for mulch, but this second batch that comes out, I would tend to keep to spin as toe. You'll get a feel for it as you're hackling and as you see the state of your fibers. But toe is quite nice to to spin. So here are my fibers after the second hackle. So again, the fibers are separating from each other. And you can see that lovely flaxen color, which led to blonde people being called flaxen haired back in the day. Now that toe, the way that I spin it is I have a, this is my favorite distaff for spinning toe. And this is just a cherry branch that I was pruning one spring, as one does, excuse me. And those bundles of tow that start coming off my medium hackle and definitely my fine hackle, I just take and I toss on top of these forked branches. And when it's just the stick from the wild, I think these kinds of distaffs tend to be called like a bird's nest distaff. I think when a professional woodworker makes something similar, they call it a crown distaff because it's just that much more refined. But your tools don't have to be expensive. And so when I'm, excuse me, when I'm spinning for one of these, I'll just tuck it under my arm and then I'll have two hands. And it's really easy to manage my toe this way, and bits of straw that are still in there, and there's lots of bits of straw still in here, tend to just fall out, or I can flick it out easily as I'm spinning. So there's my toe distaff. Okay, and my finest hackle. So the point that I want to make with this finest one, since you obviously know how to use it, is that you don't want to over process your flax at this stage. I don't think you're going to get the kind of flax, you might, but I tend not to get the kind of flax that you would buy commercially as lined flax that is absolutely clean. I tend to stop before it's absolutely clean because I find that when I'm spinning my line flax, I can easily flick off the little bits of boon that are still on the flax, or when I'm preparing my distaff, I tend to comb it out a bit, and so I can get the bits of straw out then. It's a balancing act. The more that you run your flax through your hackles, the more you're going to be breaking it into smaller fibers and leaving it behind as tow. So you have to weigh how much you do it. And if you look in the center here, we went too quickly, but there's still straw in there, and I'm content to leave that there. Now, this is my 4% of the plant. That is the long line flax. When I go to store it, I can either take this amount to wind it together to store, or I can set this aside and add more bundles of these to make a bigger strick. And as long as I have a safe place to put that. So I wanted to say that here so that you have a visual memory when I talk about it more in the next slide. Okay, so my easy tool version of my hack for the hackling process is just to use a pocket comb. So I picked this one up at the dollar store. It is one that has the same tine width across the entire length of the cone. It doesn't have like a coarse comb on one side and a fine comb on the other. It's all the same. Again, make sure you wind the flax around a finger or two, start at the tips and move toward the center. And your toe is, in this case, is what's left behind in the comb as you're doing this. So here I'm combing it out on a hard surface. Now, that's not my favorite way to use the comb. My favorite way is to comb against my leg. So I'll be wearing jeans, or I'll have a canvas apron on when I'm doing this. And the reason that I like doing it this way better is because the tines of the comb will dig down into my leg a little bit to ensure that the fiber rises up in between each tine and it gets combed. I find when I'm combing on a hard flat surface, the fiber, some of the fiber just stays underneath the teeth of the comb and doesn't get combed out. So my hack for this one, the one that I prefer, is just to comb against my leg. And I do something similar to this when I'm preparing my distaffs as well. When I open up my stricks and prepare the fiber, loosen it up to dress the distaff, I tend to comb it out a little bit, again, get a little bit more of the boon out and separate the fibers so that it's easier to spin. And that's it for my my demonstration. So are there any questions about the hackling portion of processing?
Kat, we didn't get anything in for that.
Okay, so I will move on to storage. So it's not likely that you're going to be spinning all that you process the day that you process it. I suppose it could be, but it doesn't work like that in my life. So when I'm storing my tow, I just put it into a shoebox. I'm able to pack it in there fairly tightly. I don't cram it in, but I can put a lot of tow into a shoebox, and then I can stack the shoeboxes, and it keeps the tow from being crushed. So I don't find it as useful to just put it into, say, a Ziploc bag or something, because that can get really mushed and flattened. And it's harder to floof up the tow than it is to prepare the line strick for spinning. So I want to keep my tow a little bit airy in storage. So putting it in a shoebox is the way that I handle that. When I want to store my line flax, I use this method. So basically I take my line flax and I'm twisting it and then plying it back on itself. So if you do a lot of work with cordage, this is exactly the thing that you do to make cordage. But basically I'm twisting both legs in the same direction and then wrapping them around each other in the opposite direction to make my strick. Now this strick was made up of the line flax from a few bundles of flax that I processed. And so I get a strick that looks nice and fat like this. I gauge these fat ones to be about the amount of flax that I would use to prepare a single distaff. So I know when I grab one of my fat ones, it's enough to fill a distaff. And so then when it's ready to spin, I just untwist it, comb it a little bit to separate the fibers again, and then dress my distaff. More often than that, what I do is I make itty bitty little teeny weeny stricks. Like here's a really teeny one based on the bundle size that I have made from processing. And primarily I do that because a lot of my processing is in demonstrations and outside. And I find it challenging to find a place to put that line flax to stay safe and away from breezes before I'm ready to put it into a strick. So to keep it, all my hard work from just blowing away as I'm processing more flax, I just make these teeny little stricks and then just grab a handful of these when I'm ready to dress a distaff. And you see a couple of pictures on the right. Once these back in the day, these would be stored all tied together and then just put on a hook on the wall for storage for when you were ready to spin your flax. Okay, any questions here?
Hi, Kat, sorry, yes. Going back to hackling for a sec, do you use a finer comb for your hack do you use a finer comb for the finer hackling?
I just use the one when I'm doing it by hand, and it's here. Maybe I can show you an even closer image. I would say that this is a fine comb. When I'm looking at the combs in the Dollarama and the huge variety that they have there, I would say that this would be on the fine end. But I like that it gives me the whole comb to work with. If this was one of those divided ones, the area is kind of small. This way I know that I'm always using the tine width that I want. So I prefer a single tine width comb to one that's divided. If you want to have steps in your hackling using a comb, then again, I would recommend getting a wide toothed comb and then a fine toothed comb. But I find when I'm using this, I only need the one.
Okay, thank you. And we have one more question.
Okay.
Are there any pest issues to be concerned about when storing?
Not that I have run across. So most critters are not interested in what's basically straw to them. It has very little nutrition, so there's no incentive for them to eat it. And when I have it in a shoebox, there's not a lot of access to the toe, and the stricts are wound so tightly that nothing can really get in. So I haven't really found any pest problems with that.
Okay, great. That's all the questions we have at the moment.
Okay. So another one where I wanted to throw it open just to see now, how do you feel about flax? Is this something that you want to try again? Is this something that tried it once, it's great, I'm not going to do it, but I can cross it off my bucket list? Is it a bucket list thing? What do you think you're going to be doing in the future? If anybody wants to share along those lines. Okay.
Kat, I can say that I actually right now I have to say that the numbers, like the amount of flax that you your final product, like in the line linen, based on your initial what has been grown, has sort of changed my thought on what might be possible with the flax that I've got and after processing it. I don't have any final thoughts yet, but now I'm sort of recalibrating, reprocessing what that might be and what I might be doing.
Yeah, well, I can see that it's a lot of work for just 4% of the plant. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I can see that there's some comments coming in there with future plans.
Okay. So did you want to read those out loud? Or
sure, yeah, sure, I
okay.
can. So Carol's asking, can we order more seeds from you for next year?
Well, what I could do is I could send out my seed sources. I think that I don't want to be a seed supplier. And if I run a course like this again, I'll probably be doing the same thing, offering seeds to people in the course, but I don't think it will, I'll just sell it to other people. But what we'll do, I think, is we'll send out the sources that I know so that you can have a list of places to try next.
That sounds reasonable. Thank you. Okay, so Susan says that she will definitely do this again next year, maybe even a bigger plot.
Mm-hmm.
Same with Darlene. She says she'll be planning a larger plot next year. Okay. Flannery is saying, as if anybody is interested, Graham and I at Fiber Focus, would love to publish about their flax journey. Mine was a complete failure, but I'm definitely going to try again. Ruth says, I will try it again next year. I will plant earlier, even in frost warning weather. And Elaine is, I will be spending a year at least to prepare and spin all that I have grown this year, but I'll definitely consider doing it again. I love all of this coming back for next season. Does the comb substitute for using the hackles?
That's right. So the comb is my hack. It's my tool that you can readily use to do the same thing that the antique hackles do, because there's not really a marketplace for those where you can just go out and find them. You can keep an eye out, start antiquing if that's your thing, and maybe see them there, but or have them made for you. But because there's not a huge demand yet, we're going to change that. You can't go to fiber fairs really and buy them easily. So yeah, the comb is the substitute.
Okay, I like how approachable that is.
Yeah.
Sandy says, probably a bucket list event for me. I'm saving some bits of flax unredded and will save some redded so I can do a presentation to the guild or a historical group.
Excellent.
Another comment, I will try this again next year, but use a different plot, as I planted in the same spot as last year and the flax seemed to be stunted.
Yeah, that's
definitely.
Green covers and help with that. They help to replenish your soil. So I don't know if that's part of your gardening practice, but I find it really helpful.
Okay. We'll definitely do again. Still a bit intimidated, especially with trying to find time to do it all, but love what I have learned and been a blast to do so far. Harvesting in batches because my plot did not grow evenly.
Okay. So with respect to the time thing, I'm asked all the time how long it takes me to do these steps. And I find it takes about 7 minutes for me to go from that full bundle through the break and the sketching and all 3 hackles and then winding it together. So there's an idea of how long it takes me to do that.
Yeah, that's great to know. Jane says, I'm happy that I grew some and have some seeds. And she has some seeds, but I'm a bit daunted by the processing spinning part.
Mm-hmm.
We have a comment that says, I'd love to watch you spin your flax.
How high is your tolerance for bad language?
Lynn says, I might try it again in a sunnier spot. My flax isn't very long. I didn't use all of my seeds, so would plant more densely next year. Carol says, I want to do it again. I would take this course again if offered,
Well,
which
great.
is wonderful to hear. Yeah. Rona says, well, I will appreciate all the more the work that we never see when looking at a beautiful linen garment in a shop. Thank you so much for this important opportunity to understand the process and to do it ourselves. And I think that's everything that's in the chat.
Okay. So there's just a couple more slides that I want to. So a big thank you from me to you. Thank you very much for taking part in this with me. I love sharing all about flax, and it was great to do it with such an appreciative audience. And I love people experiencing it for themselves. So thank you very much. If you want to keep in touch with me, please do. My email is cat.theflaxlady@gmail.com, or I'm on Instagram at @cat_the_flaxlady. Feel free, if you have further questions about what you're doing, just drop me a line. I'm happy to help, even when this course isn't going on again. So please do stay in touch. And just a couple points before we stop the recording. As you know, we do record these events. And when I was designing this, I anticipated that only a few people would watch the recordings, the ones that didn't come to the live seminar sessions. I thought everyone would be really excited to be able to talk to me live, and it didn't turn out quite that way. Maybe they're still excited, but a lot more people are accessing the videos than I thought, and for longer periods. However, I don't want to, YouTube is unsecured, so I'm not comfortable leaving my content up there for long periods of time, which is why the earlier YouTube videos have disappeared from that space already. So my screen just disappeared for me. Did it disappear from you too?
Yes, Kat, we're back.
Okay, let me call that back up again. Okay, a little easier to see. So the end of that discussion is that this video will be pulled from the YouTube site November 13th. So you have a couple of months to review this video if you like, and then after that it's gone forever. The Facebook private group is going to stay. I'm not going to close it down, but I've been looking at it probably about once a day, and I'm going to stop doing that after November 13th as well. So if you want to get in touch with me, that will no longer be a great venue to do that after November 13th. And then finally, we're going to be putting together a survey about the course that we'll be sending out by email. And I hope that when you get it, you will take advantage. I lost my application again. You will take advantage of the survey, give us some feedback about the course so that we can continue to improve. So then I'm going to throw it back over to the OHS team to talk about their events. I'll try and bring that back for you so that.
Thank you so much, Kat, for your wonderful presentation and for being here with us for the entire series. We have certainly enjoyed it. Thank you also to our participants for your interest and for your questions. Thank you to Pat Shaver, OHS admin, for her admin support with these webinars. Thank you to OHS for their support with this entire web series. Please don't forget to mark your calendars for the OHS conference running October 21st to the 24th. Thank you all very much for attending. Have a wonderful weekend.